So in chapter 28, we find this whole cosmic manifestation was analyzed. There was an analytical understanding of Prakriti, Purusha, and the Supreme Lord. So, Paramatma, basically, that is how it was described. Now, after analyzing what is this material nature, that actually this material nature has two different functions. For the living entity, it acts differently, and for the Supreme Lord, it is different. For the living entity, it causes delusion for them. It binds them in this material world. Under the three modes of material nature, the living entity performs varieties of fruitive works, identifies with the body, and practically becomes entangled and suffers the pangs of miseries in this material world. The living entity, who is actually part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, that is also described, that even though he is actually superior by nature, but because of his tendency to enjoy matter, he has become subjected to control of Maya. That is the reason. And the way out, the whole process of why Vedic literatures are given is for this purpose. That living entities are now entangled, they have forgotten their original position, and they are in misery in this material world. So Krishna very kindly gives them this Vedic literature so that they can analyze and understand what is this Prakriti, who am I, why am I suffering in this material world, and what is the way out, how I can be situated in my original position as part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. So that is why Vedic knowledge is given. So, once a person becomes knowledgeable, as it is stated even in Bhagavad Gita, Bahunam Janmanam Ante Jnanavan Mam Prapadyate Vasudevam Sarvamiti Sa Mahatma Sudurlabha. That actually when one becomes knowledgeable, then one surrenders unto the Supreme Lord, understanding that actually everything is sustained by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is the supreme enjoyer. It is very important to understand that until and unless one comes to this final conclusion of devotional service, all other processes they do not give satisfaction to the soul. They do not satisfy the self. Very nicely, Prabhupada analyzes this. I was just reading in 4th Canto when I was reading about Dhruva Maharaj. So Dhruva Maharaj, he approached his mother crying, and he went and explained what all happened, that he wanted to sit on the lap of his father, but his stepmother Suruchi, she forbade, and she said that you cannot. You have very good desire, you want to sit, you are also son of a king, no doubt. But you cannot sit on the lap of your father or on his throne unless you take birth from my womb. So because you have not taken birth from my womb, you are unfortunate, so you cannot sit. So I am advising you, you go and perform austerities, please the Supreme Lord Vishnu, and then once the Supreme Lord is pleased, you ask him for benediction to be born from my womb in the next life. And then you will be able to sit on your father's throne. Then you can sit on slab. So that means Suruchi actually wanted he should die. And only in the next birth, when Dhruva Maharaj comes back as taken birth from her womb, then only it is possible. So she wanted basically that he should change his body, then only it is possible. So Dhruva Maharaj was very puzzled, and he was, Bhagavatam explains that actually he was hissing like a snake. He was so angry seeing this kind of arguments of stepmother. So he went like this to his own mother and explained the whole thing. So Suniti, his own mother, she said that yes, what your stepmother has told you is correct. You have taken birth from an unfortunate woman's womb, and that is why you are not entitled. In fact, your father does not even consider me to be the maid servant, even like a maid servant. So, but what to do? Unfortunately, you have grown up from the milk from this unfortunate woman. But whatever your mother has told, your stepmother has told, that is truth. It is only the Supreme Lord who can actually satisfy your desires. So I am also giving you the same instructions that you go to the forest and satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then we find Dhruva Maharaj immediately gives up everything, goes to the forest. And there, Narad Muni, he meets. So first of all, Narad Muni wants to test him that whether he is eligible candidate to perform devotional service to satisfy the Supreme Lord. And when he finds that yes, he is very much determined, Narad Muni also says the same thing. He says, my dear Dhruv, whatever your both mothers have told, that is truth. Your desires are very difficult to be obtained. No one else can actually satisfy those desires. So one may question, Prabhupada writes in the purport, that actually Narad Muni himself is described when Dhruva Maharaj is praying to Narad Muni. He says, "You are as good as the Supreme Lord." It's a fact. Sakshat haritvena samasta shastre. The Supreme Lord empowers his pure devotee with his own potency. So Narad Muni could immediately actually satisfy the desires of Dhruva Maharaj. He could have just blessed him that yes, tathastu, what you want? You want bigger kingdom than your own father? Be blessed. You want bigger kingdom than Swayambhu Manu? Be blessed. You want bigger kingdom than even his father Brahma? Yes, I will bless you. Because actually that is what the desire was. His desire was not only to get bigger kingdom than his own father, he wanted bigger kingdom than his father also, Manu, Swayambhu Manu. And Swayambhu's Manu's father is Brahma. So Dhruva Maharaj wanted even better, bigger kingdom even than Brahma. So Narad Muni is representative of the Supreme Lord, pure devotee. So Prabhupada writes there that actually Narad Muni could easily satisfy his desire. But Narad Muni wanted to engage him in devotional service, because that is the ultimate goal of life. So Narad Muni also gave the same instruction as it was given by Suruchi and Suniti. He confirmed that yes, that is the ultimate goal of life. You must satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead by your endeavor in devotional service, and then all your desires will be fulfilled. So here we find actually Devahuti is also giving this very important conclusion. She is also saying the same thing, that my dear Lord, you have already described knowledge about the living entity, knowledge about this material nature, how this material nature binds the living entity. You have also described about the super soul and the process of meditation. Now please describe the ultimate goal of life. Moolam, he says, the final. So, very nicely Prabhupada translates that. Devahuti inquired, my dear Lord, you have already very scientifically described the symptoms of the total material nature and the characteristics of the spirit according to the Sankhya system of philosophy. So this is already described. Now I shall request you to explain the path of devotional service, which is the ultimate end of all philosophical systems. All kinds of philosophical systems, if it does not lead to devotional service of the Lord, it is considered to be just beating the empty husk. No grains will come out. It is useless labor only. So, all philosophical system, as Krishna himself says, Bahunam Janmanam Ante after many, many births, person who is actually in knowledge will come to the point of understanding Vasudevam Sarvamiti, that Krishna is the root of all existence. So when a person becomes knowledgeable that Krishna is the root of all, everything, then what he will do? He will water that root. So that is called as devotional service. Simply understanding sambandha is not everything. Bhakti process, it has three very important elements. All three are very important. First of all, one has to understand the sambandha. And all sambandhas are required. What is my relation with this material world? No, I have no relation with this material world. One has to understand even this. I have nothing to do with matter. It is the energy of the Supreme Lord. Now, falsely I am trying to exploit it for sense enjoyment. But the result is, actually I am suffering. That is the result. So, first one has to understand sambandha. What is all this? What is material nature? What is its sambandha to the Supreme Lord? What is living entity? What is the sambandha of the living entity to the Supreme Lord? So this has to be first of all understood. And when it is understood, then one has to act on that platform. And that process is called Bhakti Yoga. One has to perform devotional service, simply understanding what is material nature, what is Supreme Lord, what is living entity. That is not end in itself. That is just the beginning. So one has to act on that platform, and then finally, by acting on pure devotional platform, one will attain final phala, prayojana, that is Krishna Prema. And that devotional service should be ahetuki apratihata, yayatma suprasiditi. In order to completely satisfy the self, the devotional service also should not be mixed. It should not be mixed with karma. It should not be mixed with jnana or with yoga. Jnana karmadi anavritam. One has to completely give up any kind of desires for jnana and karma. Prabhupada, from this life of Dhruva Maharaj, explains this also very nicely. That Dhruva Maharaj, after his performance of severe austerities for 6 months, he was able to see the Supreme Lord face to face. Of course, that severe austerities were all in relation with devotional service. Just like the austerity he performed was basically to bring down the needs of this material body. We all know that for the first month he ate only fruits from the forest. Later on he was eating only dry leaves. Later on he was drinking only water. Later on he was only taking air. Finally he stopped even breathing air. Along with that, Narad Muni had also advised him he should chant this mantra constantly, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Along with that, Narad Muni had also advised him that you, in the forest, you make the deity form of the Lord and offer everything unto him. Perform according to Pancharatri ki vidhi. You perform devotional service. So all these things he was performing, and for 6 months, at the end of 6 months, he was able to see the Supreme Lord face to face. The Supreme Lord told him, "My dear Dhruva," so we know that the Lord touched him. First of all, Dhruva Maharaj was bewildered seeing the Supreme Lord, and because he was not mature, he did not know what to tell to the Supreme Lord. So immediately the Lord touched him with his conscience, and Dhruva Maharaj, being so much blessed by the Lord, he said, "My dear Lord, actually by now, till now, all my senses were sleeping. Now they have become awakened." So very nicely he offers his prayers, and the Lord was satisfied with his prayers. And the Supreme Lord says, "My dear Dhruva, even though your desires are dushbhara, they are very difficult to be satisfied. Because how can the Lord give him the most exalted position? Brahma is the leader of this whole Brahmanda. He is the head of all living entities in this Brahmanda. He occupies the topmost position. And Dhruva is asking even better position than him in this Brahmanda. How to give him? Isn't it? So the Supreme Lord gives him his own planet in Shvetadvip, Dhruva Loka. Prabhupada explains how the Supreme Lord gave him something extraordinary. Because even Brahma cannot enter that planet. Even Brahma cannot enter. When Brahma is in trouble, he comes to Shvetadvip on the shore, and from there he prays to the Supreme Lord. So that planet where Brahma cannot even enter was given personally by the Lord to Dhruva. His desires were satisfied. And Dhruva had come with a mentality of taking revenge. He was very angry. He wanted to take revenge from his step-brother and his stepmother. Lord satisfied that desire also. The Lord said, "My dear Dhruva, very soon your brother Uttam, he will go hunting in the forest and he will give up his life there. Later on, your stepmother Suruchi, when she sees that her son has died, in search of him, she will become mad and she will go and search after her son in the forest. There she will be devoured by forest fire." So the Lord satisfied his desire also. Both the desire. And Dhruva Maharaj, after giving him all these things, and the Lord also said, "Dhruva, I bless you. For next 36,000 years, you will rule this whole earth. And after that, you will go to Dhruva Loka to reside with me eternally in that planet." The speciality of that planet is that even when Brahma Loka is devastated, this Dhruva Loka will remain. That will not be destroyed. So the Lord blessed him and Dhruva Maharaj. So the Lord took farewell and went back on his Vahana Garuda. Dhruva Maharaj, when he was going back to his house, Bhagavatam describes, he was not at all satisfied in his mind. Not at all satisfied. He was feeling very ashamed, and Vidura is asking to Maitreya Rishi, "My dear Maitreya, Dhruva is Arthavit. Arthavit means one who knows the value of life. Artha means goal of life. Vit means one who knows. So Prabhupada explains Arthavit means Paramahamsa, one who takes only the essence of life and segregates everything else. So such an Arthavit of that category Dhruva Maharaj was, and he was able to see the Supreme Lord face to face. All his desires were satisfied. Why still Dhruva was not satisfied in his mind? What is the reason? Why was he not satisfied? So then Maitreya Rishi explains that actually Dhruva Maharaj was not satisfied because he was feeling ashamed that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he had approached him with enmity in his mind, with duality in his mind towards his stepmother and stepbrother, and in order to get some opulent position, in order to just take that revenge. So, because of these kinds of desires, Dhruva Maharaj felt very ashamed of himself and he was not satisfied. Because of all these feelings, he could not even think of mukti, that the Supreme Lord is Mukunda. He could have asked him that, my dear Lord, please liberate me from this material world. Of course, Prabhupada explains devotee does not ask mukti. But here the point was, Dhruva Maharaj was so much engrossed, so much influenced by his inimical behavior in his consciousness, that actually he forgot that he is standing before the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And later on, Dhruva Maharaj repents also. He says, what a fool I was. I could have asked Mukunda that please engage me in your service. What have I asked? Why I should be satisfied? Rather, I have asked him bondage in this material world. Isn't it? Generally, after seeing the Lord, what do a devotee deserve? He deserves that he goes back to Godhead. But the Supreme Lord has awarded him 36,000 year you rule. So he says, my dear Lord, this is a punishment. What foolish I was. So there Prabhupada explains, from Dhruva's life, learn. Do not approach the Supreme Lord with any kinds of motives. Later on, you'll have to repent. If you don't want to repent later on like Dhruva Maharaj, then don't approach the Supreme Lord with any kind of motives. No doubt, you will be purified. Dhruva Maharaj was completely purified. But the Supreme Lord is very kind. Dhruva Maharaj had to be away from the Supreme Lord for 36,000 years, because that is what he wanted, and the Lord satisfied that desire. So actually the glories of the devotional services, pure devotional services, only that can satisfy the self. Nothing else. Mixture of karma, mixture of jnana, adulterated devotional service, that actually cannot satisfy the self. It's only the pure devotional service which can satisfy. And that is how Maitreya Rishi says to Vidura. He says, whereas Vidura, so that is, he is explaining the reason why Dhruva Maharaj was so much not at all satisfied. He says, whereas Vidura, you are known to be a pure devotee of the Lord, who is just satisfied by licking honey from the lotus feet of the Lord, always being attracted. You are like a honey bee which is attracted to the lotus feet of the Lord. So this is similar to what Rupa Goswami says in one of his songs. Manamanasa madhukaram arpita nijapada pankaja makarande. So such a pure devotee of the Lord who is always hankering for the nectar from the lotus feet of the Lord, he has no other desire whatsoever but just to be surrendered and more attracted to the lotus feet of the Lord, serving the lotus feet of the Lord. So with this we'll stop. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki jai.